After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister's taxes, debt, inflation, and promises, Canadians are hungry.
You're missing the scandals.
Literally, according to the Bank of Canada, the Food Banks Canada report, 50% of Canadians say they're worse off than a year ago. 25% are in food insecurity, and a quarter of young adults went to a food bank in 3 months alone this year. Why is it that Canadians who can't feed themselves have to keep feeding his morbidly obese government?
Great question.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, it would be slightly more credible to hear the Conservatives concerned about the challenges Canadians are facing if they hadn't stood and voted against more spaces in childcare, voted against our dental care program that 2 million seniors have signed up for and has now delivered close to 100,000 dental appointments for seniors in just 22 days, Mr. Speaker. They've also stood against our school foods program that's going to help 400,000 more kids across the country have full bellies as they start their school day. These are investments that they're opposed to, that we are there to help Canadians with.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's a school food program that has not served a single solitary meal, even though it was promised 3 years ago. What he's feeding is bureaucracy, not children. And if all of his spending were working, then why is it that Food Banks Canada reports today that 25% of young adults had to go to a food bank in 3 months alone, and 2 million Canadians are lined up every month? Mr. Speaker, with so many empty stomachs, isn't it just a little bit wacko to be raising carbon taxes on farmers and food?
Wacko, let's go.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we announced the National Food School program in the budget, and just after question period today, the Conservatives have an opportunity to vote in favour of the National School Food program and other initiatives that are going to help hundreds of thousands of kids across this country, and indeed millions of Canadians with the high cost of living. But he's going to stand there and vote against it, Mr. Speaker, to prevent it from delivering the help Canadians need. We will keep going on delivering support for Canadians, and we will keep going on putting more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians with our price on pollution that supports Canadian families and successfully fights climate change.
Hear, hear.
Sure, you're fighting
the
climate
Honourable
change.
Leader of the Opposition.
He's been making exactly the same promises for 9 long years, and yet his NDP Liberal government has doubled housing costs, doubled the debt, increased the size of the bureaucracy by 50%. Now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax, all to deliver 2 million people to a food bank every single month. Mr. Speaker, if government programs were really going to solve the problem he caused, then why are Canadians so hungry?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, here's a perfect example of where the Conservatives stand. They stood and voted against our dental care for seniors program. As of today, over 2 million seniors have signed up, and in the 22 days since May 1st, close to 100,000 seniors have gotten free dental care. That's
just did it because Jugmeat Singh made you do it.
A program that he voted against and that he campaigned against across the country over the past number of months. We will be there to invest in supporting Canadians with a national school food program, with dental care, with more childcare spaces, despite him voting against.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals say they're interested in French in Quebec and in Canada, but the Liberals are gradually paying for the disappearance of French in Western Canada. Moreover, they're mobilizing hundreds of unilingual Anglophone members to protect their Liberal colleague. Does the Prime Minister really want Francophones to believe that it's out of love for the French language that they are flooding the Association of French Francophone parliamentarians. Mr. Speaker, Francophones across our country, including those in Quebec, know full well that the Bloc is not interested in the future of French outside of Quebec. That's why they want to make Quebec their own country to protect French. But we understand that the best way to protect French in Quebec and across Canada is by investing in all communities who speak French across the country. To protect French in Quebec, yes, we're there to do that, but also to continue to stand up to protect Francophone minorities across this country, and we're going to continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Champlain. That's not true, Mr. Speaker, but the best thing that could happen to French in Quebec and in Canada and across the world would be an independent Quebec. However, Mr. Speaker, what did the Prime Minister say during the English debate in 2021 when I was the only one who wanted to talk about Francophones outside of Quebec in English, and I was told I wasn't allowed to talk about French in English at the English debate in his country? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, in that debate, like in all debates and all possible opportunities, I always stand up to defend the French fact in Canada and to defend Francophone communities across this country. I've always done so, and I'm going to continue to do so. Defend linguistic duality and both official languages in this country across this country is what I've done. It's the Liberal Party of Canada, and for our Liberal government, we're going to continue to do so at every opportunity we have.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
Loblaws isn't content just ripping off Canadians when they buy their groceries. Now they're teaming up with Rogers and Bell.
Just gonna
sit down for a sec.
Colleagues, it's important that we are able to hear the questions that are being asked as well as the answers. The Honourable Member from Burnaby South from the top, please.
Sure. I know the Conservatives don't like when I take on corporate greed, but Loblaws isn't content just ripping off Canadians when it comes to their groceries. Now Loblaws is teaming up with Rogers and Bell to rip off Canadians with their cell phone prices. We know they're going to limit choices, and limiting choices means higher prices for Canadians. The Prime Minister promised to lower cell phone fees. They're sky high. He promised to lower grocery fees. They're sky high. When will the Prime Minister finally stop greedy CEOs from ripping off Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've actually seen cell phone bills decrease across the country by 25% over the past number of years, and we're going to continue to stand up for Canadian consumers.
Cell phone bills have
and
decreased
indeed, I know the
25%.
Minister is looking into the Competition Act to see if there needs to be referred on a number of things that have come forward. But we're going to continue to stand up for the middle class and people working hard to join it, which is why we raised corporate taxes, why we asked the wealthiest Canadians to pay a little more so we can invest more in younger Canadians, why we're continuing to step up on creating fairness for every generation with this budget, with the investments we're making, and with further investments as well.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Power to stop these greedy CEOs, but you do.
It's not enough to be ripping people off at the grocery store. Today we've learned that Loblaws is teaming up.
Order. Colleagues, I know it's Wednesday and everybody is a little bit more primed for action, but it's really important for us to hear the questions and hear the answers.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. From the top, please.
Power to stop these greedy CEOs, but you do. I know the Conservatives don't like it, but we got to take on corporate greed.
It's not enough for Loblaws to be ripping people off at the grocery store. Today we've learned that Loblaws is teaming up with Rogers and Bell to block competition from other companies in their stores.
What?
This means less choice and higher cell phone bills. The Liberals are sitting on their hands. Will the Prime Minister finally stand up to the CEOs and support a full investigation into these allegations? I'd like to benefit from this opportunity to remind all members that when they will be asking questions and there are answers, that they go through the chair, please. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member knows full well that we did make improvements to give more power to the Competition Bureau because we know that it's by ensuring competition amongst the various companies that Canadians will have better results and prices. And we also know that's important to continue to do follow-ups on these issues, and that's why the minister is asking the Competition Bureau to look at what's happening in terms of cell phone packages and Loblaws. It's a challenge we're always going to take seriously.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, normally the NDP leader is well worth ignoring, but I just can't help myself. He says that the Prime Minister acts like he has no power to stop all of these greedy CEOs from ripping off consumers. Who else has the power? Well, the guy that joined the government 2 years ago. He's been in power during the worst food price inflation in over 4 decades. Will the Prime Minister agree with me that his carbon tax coalition is nothing more than an anti-competitive price-fixing scheme that is costing Canadians at the grocery store?
Here, here. Here, here. Let's go.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see that the Conservative Party's opposition to the price on pollution is ideological and not concrete, because their opposition to the price on pollution means they don't care about fighting against climate change. Even as wildfires are already raging in different parts of the country, they have no plan to fight against climate change. And they do it in the name of affordability while ignoring that the Parliamentary Budget Officer actually showed that 8 out of 10 Canadian families do better with the money put in their pockets from the Canada Carbon Rebate than it costs them with the price on pollution.
Oh, no. This is good.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has concluded that 60% of Canadians pay more in carbon tax costs than they get back in the phony rebates. 100% of middle-class Canadians pay more than they get back in the phony rebates. And now the Prime Minister wants to quadruple the tax, all at a time when he's preparing to hand over power to carbon tax Carney. Will the Prime Minister confirm if carbon tax Carney will follow through on his plan to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed that 8 out of 10 Canadian families in jurisdictions where the carbon price federal backstop applies do better off with more money in their pockets through the Canada Carbon Rebate checks that land in their bank accounts 4 times a year. That's money in their pockets that goes to the cost of groceries, the cost of rent, the cost of everything they need to raise their families. That is money in their pockets that the Leader of the Opposition would take away because of its ideological crusade against climate action.
Then I have Shefton.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister's wacko carbon tax obsession is costing Canadians not just at the pump, but it raises the cost of home heating, of groceries, because of course if you tax the farmer who produces the food and the trucker who ships the food, you tax all who buy the food. It's a housing tax because it raises the cost of building materials that go into homes. With the report out today that 25% of young people had to go to a food bank in just 3 months, will he accept the common sense Conservative bill to take the tax off the farmers who produce our food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to make that argument even though he knows full well that farm fuels are 95% exempt from the price on pollution right across the country, Mr. Speaker. That is something that he ignores because of his ideological opposition opposition to take any action in fighting climate change. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, in Conservative ridings right across the country, people are worried about droughts, people are worried about floods, people are worried about wildfires that are more and more severe. Canadians need a clean plan to fight climate change, which is something he hasn't put forward, while we are fighting climate change and putting money in people's pockets.
How are you stopping wildfires with the carbon tax?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's carbon tax applies on barns, on grain drying, on fertilizers, on off-farm vehicles. It costs literally tens of thousands of dollars for many individual farmers, all of which gets passed on. But the Prime Minister, instead of defending his taxes, resorted to a really wacko and unhinged claim that if Canadians just paid more taxes, there would be suddenly less fires. I thought that water and not taxes put out fires. But maybe the Prime Minister can clarify, how high would his tax have to go for forest fires to stop?
Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing the impacts of the extreme weather events that come from climate change that are unfortunately getting worse and worse every year. That is why our government from 2015 onwards has stepped up in the fight against climate change, because not only are we reducing Canada's emissions to the lowest level outside the pandemic in 25 years, but we're also stepping up in the jobs and technological innovations that the world needs to successfully fight climate change. We will continue to fight climate change, Mr. Speaker, and put more money in people's pockets while he sits with his arms crossed and no plan.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He didn't answer my question. Now he says that his taxes are going to make Canada a high-tech wonderland. Before, his claim was that it was going to stop forest fires. It's him that made the link, not me. Obviously, I think the link between the two is absolutely ridiculous, because his tax is not an environmental plan. It's a money-collecting plan. It's a plan of government greed. So I'll ask the question again. He wants to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre. If it gets to that high and people are all starving in the streets, will that stop the forest fires?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the Leader of the Opposition's desire to make clever rhetorical points, he actually ignores the basic facts. The price on pollution is revenue neutral for the federal government. That means the money that comes in for the price on pollution, for the carbon tax, gets returned to the jurisdictions, and is why the Parliamentary Budget Officer found 8 out of 10 Canadian families in jurisdictions where the carbon price applies do better with the Canada carbon rebate that comes in 4 times a year than the price on pollution costs them. That's a plan to fight climate change and put money in people's pockets.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to be too clever for the Prime Minister, but he's the one who made the argument that high taxes would stop forest fires, and now he can't tell us how high the tax would go to put all the fires out. He went on now to say that his tax is revenue neutral. Well, you don't have to be too clever to read the government's own published documents, which shows that he has collected $2 billion more in taxes than he's given back in rebates. That's why 100% of middle-class Canadians pay more than they get back. So once again, will he tell those middle-class people how high the tax would have to go for the fires to stop?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we just saw is climate denialism at its finest. The fact is, as global emissions rise, as carbon intensity in the atmosphere increases, extreme weather events like wildfires, droughts, and floods will simply become more and more frequent. Now, his plan is to do nothing, Mr. Speaker, and let future generations fend for themselves. Our plan is not only to reduce our emissions, but to create the solutions that the world needs while we lead on fighting climate change, bringing down emissions, and growing the economy.
Calm down, dude.